Hey, hello everyone and welcome to Extreme Graphics Tech. My name is Angelo and on today's video I am back with a topic that most of you people love about my channel, and that's talking about DLSS and frame generation. And the reason I'm bringing this video today is because, well, I was a little bit curious after I watched a video that was running some games through Runway ML. For those who are not familiar, Runway ML is like a AI video generation, but if you feed some video, then you can convert that video in something different, or something that you like a cartoon or more realistic and so on. So this guy Alfredo87 on Twitter, I'm not going to call it the other name, on Twitter, he decided to try this with some old games, right? And these games, and we'll put in a video around here while I talk, as you see, they are running like Shenmue or GTA through Runway ML, and then the game is being transformed to more realistic graphics. Of course, Runway ML take a while to process, so it's not like on the fly or real time process, but I thought it was interesting because it seems that AI is obviously the future of video game graphics in some ways, and I don't expect this specific result to happen because I don't think it looks, you know, it's just like first generation and so on, and it has some uncanny valley and things, but clearly it does look so much better in some areas, making improving like lights or realistic or texturing and things like that. It looks quite interesting, right? And even though we don't have the technology yet to make this on the fly on our GPUs, I think the future of graphics is going to go through this at some point. So what I think is that developers are going to develop games where, you know, the game runs in certain way, and then maybe instead of creating textures, or you know, they can just tell the AI that anything that is a certain specific color become grass, for example, and so these sort of things are generated on the fly, having to use less memory maybe, or just, you know, for that specific thing, or go through the whole image and reprocess it to show you a more realistic image than the one they made with better lighting and so on. So I think this is where it's going, and the reason I'm bringing this and what does it have to do with DLSS and frame generation is because I just had a curiosity after I watched this of seeing how much is AI, you know, helping performance in games to achieve better graphics. So I took the RTX 4060, which is the lowest RTX GPU that supports well, at least a discrete. I think there is an RTX 4050, but on mobile. But for a discrete GPU, I think the RTX 4060 is the lowest one that supports DLSS and DLSS frame generation. And I didn't expect, or I didn't know what to expect when I started this experiment, which is only about running the games at 4K with max settings, absolutely max. Whatever this game throws, I am activating it, like ray reconstruction, ray tracing, overdrive, path trace, whatever it is that the game has is maxed out. So what I wanted to see is run the game at native 4K resolution with everything maxed out and no sort of AI or DLSS or anything, and see the performance on an RTX 4060. And why on an RTX 4060? Because I think that's where people are going to benefit the most with AI future on, you know, lower spec GPUs. There is no point on doing all this on a RTX 4090, on the future 5090, because those are Halo products that not everyone is going to be able to buy. But if AI is really doing the hard job, or, you know, I think then this is where companies are going to be focusing, because it's getting harder and harder every day to make more better and faster GPUs that don't cost like an arm and a leg. So I thought, okay, So I know the RTX 4060 is not supposed to be made for 4K full resolution or anything. Many people are always arguing that it's made for 1080p. I don't agree that a GPU is made for specific resolutions, because I think a GPU, it will depend on the software you're running on it, okay? Even a new game right now can run very well at 4K on a 4060, while others will not, and even some games will not run very well on a 4090 at 4K. So I don't think the resolution is that's the point, but some people argue about that. But anyway, so I just wanted to see, okay, how much I get, and then by activating the Dlss Ultra Performance, or the lowest level of performance that the game allows, and frame generation at the same time, how much performance I'm going to gain from that. I have to say that before starting, I didn't know what to expect. I wasn't expecting the games to become magically playable. I just wanted to see how much performance lift there was, because let's remember that there are lots of things limiting the performance of the RTX 4060, like the 128 boss bit that is very small, and so more resolution is going to be crammed into that small boss, and that is going to, create a bottleneck for the GPU. But then by using the Dlss, you're putting through a lower resolution, and then ray trace has to calculate less rays and things like that. So I wasn't sure what to expect, but at the end of the day, I was pleasantly surprised. But surprise, I'll explain after we see the benchmarks. And I'm going to start these benchmarks with God of War Ragnarok, one of the latest games that I have. So being that this is a game started on PlayStation 4, it's not surprised that you can even get 4K native with everything max with 30 FPS. Honestly, I thought I was going to fare worse, but it's not bad. So the 4K native 30 FPS for God of War Ragnarok allows you to play this game without issues on a simple RTX 4060. But anyway, that's beyond the point, because that's not what this video is about. So after showing you how it runs, then we are going to activate the Dlss Ultra Performance and the Dlss Frame Generation. And here we go up to 70 and sometimes even 80 FPS, which is double. However, I have to say I was a little bit underwhelmed by the results. I was expecting more, because obviously if we were playing at 30 before, and now we have frame generation with the Dlss 4, doesn't double your frames exactly. You're still, like internally it must be running at around 40 to 50 FPS, and we are now using Ultra Performance. So this was not the exact start I was expecting, but still I think we are getting like a double the frame rate. So the AI is doing a lot here, because you're getting more performance out of the AI than you're getting out of the GPU, or in consideration. But then I said, okay, next game, Black Myth Wukong, a game that, when everything is maxed out, goes into cinematic path trace mode. And here we see that we have only 2 frames per second. And it's not just that you only have 2 frames per second, it is completely terrible. This is like a PowerPoint presentation, but the lag is so severe that you move the character and it responded like 2 or 3 seconds after, which meant that it was impossible for me to do absolutely anything in this game. I was trying just to move around to show you a little bit more, but it was impossible. I could never actually get the camera and the movement correctly. Then I activated the Dlss Ultra Performance and Frame Generation, and now we are at a very cinematic 30 to 24 FPS, which I wouldn't consider playable, of course, because evidently it means that even with frame generation the internal frame rate is bad, but is now so much more responsive, and I can actually move the camera around, perfectly well, move the characters, no issue, even if everything, is still, from my point of view, not something I would recommend you to play like this. But I find fascinating that we are getting 1100% more performance So it means that essentially AI is doing so much more for performance than the actual GPU is. Don't take this as exact words. I'm just trying, to give you an idea or convey an idea here. So before somebody gets angry. And then I was tested Dying Light 2, which is an old game by now, but it's still I quite like the looks and everything that the game does. And even a 4K is not enough. It's too much for the 4060, but much better than some of the other games we tested like Black Myth Wukong, and we get around 12 to 14 FPS. We can move the camera, we can move around. So fine, no issues whatsoever. Of course, this is not playable. I wouldn't recommend anyone to play like this, but at least you know what is happening, and at least you can control the characters and everything else. So that means that in this case, at least it's something that you have some control over. But when we activate DLSS performance, because it doesn't support ultra performance and frame generation, you can immediately feel the difference. I'm sure you just saw the difference in smoothness, and the game feels very good, even though with frame generation, I don't know what is the internal frame rate that is using at the moment, but the game, I never felt like the game was laggy or that there was errors or that it looked bad. Honestly, this is a very playable experience. As long as we are over 40 FPS most of the time or all the time, it means you're going to have, a nice experience. I'm not recommending that you have to play like this, but you can. However, the point of this is not to show how games become playable, but to show how AI is doing so much more to leverage performance. So this is Final Fantasy 16 now, and I wasn't sure if I should include it here, because this game is notorious because of how bad everything in this game is implemented. Even here, we are playing at 14 frames per second, and even though I can sort of do things, it feels so much worse than the Dying Light 2 that was going on around 12 frames per second. This game feels so much laggy, so much worse than what I was doing on Dying Light 2. So I said, wow, this is terrible already, but okay, fine. At the end of the day, the RTX 4060 is not supposed to be playing this game good, and this is just 12 to 14 FPS, so I'm surely going to get much better situation when activate every technology. Well, this is the results. We are only doubling the frame rate even after activating ultra performance and frame generation, which is definitely not good, because this is a game that should be running much better after activating DLSS, ultra performance, and frame generation. And as you can see here, it still feels slow. Everything is moving like in slow motion or something, so I am not sure what's going on. But this was a terrible experience. I even restarted everything, so I think there is two issues here. One is VRAM and the other one is the memory bus of the RTX 4060. But well, considering how badly optimized this game is, I didn't want to lose more time on it. So moving on, now we're testing a game that I consider is quite good optimized, which is Ghost of Tsushima. You can see here that with everything maxed out in this game, we move at around 20 to 24 FPS, which I don't consider a bad result considering how good the game looks, and this is 4K native with everything completely maxed out. So yeah, it's good. I think the game is running decently, and even though it's 20, it feels responsive, that you can move the character around. I'm not saying it's playable, I'm just saying that compared for like other games we tested, at least this one feels responsive. So you can do some things in here, just appreciate the game at least at 4K native for taking pictures or whatever it is that you want to do. But the important part is the next one is when we activate all AI options, and now we go above 60 FPS. Even though I think it's a little bit underwhelming as a result, because I will have expected a little bit more seeing some of the other results and the fact that we are activating frame generation, but still I find that it makes quite a difference, and you can see it on your screen. The moment we change from one to the other, you can see how much smooth it is. I didn't see any artifacts or any big issues, and the game, I think I would prefer, if I had to choose, I would prefer to play this way. Of course, it would be better if you just lower your resolution, but if we didn't have that option and it was about using all the AI features or not using them at 4K, then I think this is quite a good results here. Now, this is the game that gave me the worst results of all. And I think this is due, again, because of the memory bandwidth of the GPU and just the 8 gigabytes of VRAM. This game, as you see, is running around 10 FPS with everything maxed out at 4K native, which is okay, you know, and this area is quite heavy. I have tested other areas, and this is one of the most heavy, weirdly enough. But okay, I wasn't expecting much. I think 10 frames, all things considered, well, is a good result for the RTX 4060 with ray tracing and everything else. Max out 4K. However, what I found out when I switched to DLSS Ultra Performance and frame generation, even restarting the game, was this. I don't know if I ran into a bug. I tried many times and I couldn't find anything. The game just runs worse with all of this activated than without it. And I think, as I said, it's because of VRAM. Because this game fills the VRAM quite quickly, and frame generation uses about around 1 gig of VRAM. So to me, the main problem that's happening here is that there is no VRAM enough to hold the frame, and so it has to continually flush RAM from one side to the other to try to move. And look, even now it's creating weird artifacts. The rendering looks like an aquarella painting or something. So yeah, then this game we can say it was a regression. However, another game from the same company, and I believe it's the same engine, that ran completely different and much better, was Spider-Man Miles Morales. In this case, of course, it doesn't have maybe the same amount of ray tracing, I'm not sure, but here we have everything maxed out, and it's running at around 20 to 25 FPS. Well, even however, in the cinematics it's going as low as 15. But yeah, we know cinematics are more demanding, and in this area, which is a lot less demanding because we're looking at the sky, you can see that it goes above 30 FPS. So well, that's the result. Whether you consider it good or not, that's okay. The point is that when we activate DLSS Ultra Performance and frame generation, we go from 25 to more than 80 frames per second, and you can feel the difference in your screen. And this is, we are basically having 4 times more performance purely based on AI. So we can say that 25% of the performance of this game is done by the GPU, like the raster part of it, like the graphics, and the 80 or 60% of the rest is done entirely by the AI cores. So this is what I mean when I say that, how different and how much of a different AI is doing for games, and how I see this being the future for many reasons. So this is an interesting result because we go from 15 to 20 to more than 60 FPS, which makes the game completely different. But probably the game that had the most transformative experience and here was Hellblade 2. And don't ask me why, because here I'm talking that the massive gain in performance is absolutely massive. We are now at like 2 to 3 frames per second, okay? And you can see it's completely PowerPoint presentation, it's unplayable, it's hard to control the character, but not as bad as it was in Black Myth Wukong. But still, it's not a pleasant experience, a 4K native with the RTX 4060. We know this uses Unreal Engine, okay? So I'm not sure how it affects it, but the difference here is massive. You see, we are talking here like, I don't know, 3,000 maybe difference in performance, 3,000%. We go from 2 to 3 frames to more than 60 frames. Look at how fluid and smooth it looks, even though we are using frame generation. It's probably internally at around 40. And graphically still looks stunning. The Ultra Performance, even if it's rendering at 720p, I think it's doing an excellent job at taking this game to 4K. So I guess it may be because of the kind of visual, but everything combined, the fact that we went from 2 to 3 frames to more than 60 shows how important AI is going to be. But that's not all. We have now Cyberpunk completely overdrive mode of 4K native, and we get 1 frame per second, maybe less. So I'm not sure. I think this Hellblade gained more than this game by going to DLSS Ultra Performance, just because of the difference in performance that we end up with, but because I don't know exactly how slow it was, because I think MSI Afterburner, the lowest it can go is 1 frame per second, but I am going to bet that this was even lowest than 1 frame per second. I'm not sure how much we are gaining. However, this is overdrive on our RTX 4060, 1 frame per second. But the moment we set the DLSS ultra performance and frame generation, we go to a game that is absolutely transformative and absolutely playable. Not all games are going to be playable, but I think by the nature of this Cyberpunk, that those 40 to 50 FPS, even using frame generation, doesn't feel as bad. This is a game that is already a bit laggy by nature, and it feels heavy to control, so it doesn't seem to affect too much in that sense. So I will say, imagine going from 1 frame per second to more than 40 by just activating 2 features of the GPU. So I think you see clearly that companies are going to bet in this technology because it does a lot more for performance than more CUDA or compute units. Well, as you saw, the reason I say I was pleasantly surprised, not because those games magically all of them became absolutely playable and now we were running at 4K 120 FPS. Some of those games still are not playable even after using those things, but most of the game, and I'm not saying all because we saw one regression, and I think that's due to VRAM, okay, as in the case of Ratchet and Clank. Most of the games gain a lot of frames, like a lot. Let's remember that when using ultra performance and DLSS, we are basically rendering 1 pixel, and 7 of those pixels are 1 pixel for real and 7 based on AI. And the reason I say that is because when you render with the DLSS frame generation, you are creating a whole frame that is completely made up by the AI, and then you're rendering internally at 720p and upscaling to 4K. So if you do the math, you'll see that a lot of those frames, like 7 out of 8 pixels, are AI created, okay? And some games, I would argue that they go from non-playable to playable, and some games go from absolutely non-playable or PowerPoint presentation to somehow something that you can understand. I won't say those games become playable necessarily, like Black Myth would come, but it's definitely much higher in quality and performance just by activating those options. So I think it's quite interesting to discuss this and see how much AI is doing for games, and I think it's going to do a lot more in the future, at least for the more, you know, AAA cinematic games, because they are becoming very expensive to make, and at the same time they are starting to require some amount of render and raster and ray trace that, you know, not everybody can afford. So the problem is, if AAA keeps going that way, and then when the specs or requirements for the games comes out, people start screaming because most people still have low-end hardware. Even a PlayStation 5 or an Xbox Series X, I will call it at this point low-end hardware, and people expect better and better graphics, but you know, the GPU power is not there, so they have to come up with new ideas, new way of rendering things and so on, to try to please that sort of crowd. Of course, this hardware generation that we have now on console, there is not much they can do in terms of AI, but probably for the next generation, AI is going to be a big part of it. We are already seeing that on the PlayStation 5 Pro, where they are leveraging the AI for PSSR. Even though in this case it's only for like upscaling, I think on the next generation AI is going to be playing a more critical role, because that's the only way to leverage. So imagine if we were able to do what we saw at the beginning with the Shenmue and GTA 5 game, GTA game, just, you know, running on a basic level, but on top you can do real-time improvement to the image quality by running AI that is not just upscaling or generating frames, but actual inference when you are changing the quality of the graphic and textures and lighting on the fly. I think that's the way, because it's probably cheaper to produce that in the silicon space than to keep adding more CUDAs and CUDAs, which are always consuming more electricity and take more space in the die, and then, you know, it's become super expensive and people are, you know, just screaming, because even the PlayStation 5 Pro is $700 and people are already like, this is just absolutely insane. So if we don't want consoles to cost $1,000 or $1,200, then something has to give, and I think AI is going to be the answer in this case. So I hope you like this sort of hopefully not very long video, interesting at least. I hope it was at least interesting for you, and as I always say, see you on the next video.